Hello, my name is Bob Hines, and it's my honor and privilege to serve as the pastor of the Oakland Presbyterian Church, a congregation that has served this community since 1887. For much of our history, this congregation has served a largely rural area with a special focus on the citrus industry. But in more recent years, as the community has changed, our church has reached out to the new residents of our community. We want to serve the people that God brings to our neighborhood. Over the years, this congregation has worshiped in 3 different sanctuaries, and our most recent building campaign resulted in our Christian Life Center, a wonderful facility that we dedicated in 2002. Of course, our theology reminds us that the church is not a building, but the people who gather together to worship and serve the Lord. With that in mind, as we were thinking about ways in which we could celebrate the history of our local congregation, we decided that we wanted to hear from those people who were longtime members of our church. After all, people are the heart and soul of any congregation. What you are about to see are portions of interviews we did with these people. They have some marvelous stories to share about the history of this church. As we listen to their stories, I hope that we'll be inspired to do whatever we have to do to ensure that the Oakland Presbyterian Church continues to thrive and serve the Lord as we have in the past.
This church has been my life. I was raised so that our social life was also part of this church.
It was just a warm place to be. You never felt pressured. You felt like it was an honor to be here.
I knew it was somewhere I could always come if I had troubles or needed help.
Well, any time that I would really feel downhearted, I could seem to come to church and it would help me a lot.
The people have always been there for other people that needed friends and needed to show kindness and concern.
But our church has always been ready to answer a call when they come in for something needs done, it's done.
The church has meant so much to me, and I'm sure to everybody that's connected with it. And it's a unique church, a unique family.
I used to see it every morning when I went to work, and I saw it usually, I saw it every afternoon when I came home from work. And one day I was thinking about it, this is a landmark for this community.
The love in this church, it's a loving bunch of people. And even though we're getting a lot of strangers and moving in here, they're not strangers anymore.
It has meant a lot to me spiritually. I've enjoyed watching the church grow and go from a little country church to one that's more sophisticated and is reaching more people.
The church is really not the facilities that we have. The Lord has really blessed us, and we have wonderful buildings and grounds, but it's the people that we have in the church that is the real treasure that we have.
I married into the family. I would consider myself a newcomer to the church, and even though it was back in 1949, and when Jeanette and I were married in 49 in the old church, the old stone church.
I think my earliest memory of the church was in the yellow brick building, and we had a Sunday school room that had a little sandbox on a table. And Helen Borland was my teacher, and that's when I learned about pretty girls. And that's the first time I noticed a pretty girl.
And my grandmother, Willis, was a charter member. There were 7 of them that got together. And so that's as long as somebody's been in the church. I guess I haven't ever known anything but that. So it's made my life. I was secretary of the women in the church for years and years and years, and then I had the circle. I was head of a circle, and as each thing came along, And my mother was also the pianist at church for years. But one of my main things of working with the church was when I started teaching cradle roll. When I was 15 years old and the children were 8 and 9, Trina Lummis and Jack Ross and a few more of them that are still coming.
I came from a long string of people who were family people who were interested in the church. My great-grandfather, who named Orlando, was very active in the church and in the faith. I can remember when I was brought into this church as a member. I was, I think, around 8 or 9 years old. I was sent across the street to the auntie, who knew a lot about the Bible and so forth. Of course, the whole family was supposed to know a lot. But she talked with me to let my mother know whether or not she thought I was mature enough to join the church.
I joined the church in 1951, and when I was a senior in high school, my wife Sue had already, she was raised in this church, and so I started dating her. And naturally, I guess that's what brought me here, you know, dating her and coming to church here, because there were a lot of other young people who were coming to this church too. It wasn't until 1951 when I joined the church. And there's a little, I've always thought it was rather unique. There was a lady in this church. It was Jack Ross's mother, Miss Catherine Ross. In 1951, one Sunday morning, she walked up to me and she said, "Fred," she said, "you've been coming here as a visitor long enough. It's time to join." And she says, "Thank you," and she turned around and walked off. That's all she said.
I remember back when I was in college, and Miss Ada Briley, or Mrs. Briley, was the choir director and the organist. And during the summer months, the choir took its usual sabbatical, and every now and then she would ask me to come out and sing a solo. So I started at an early age, compared to now, coming out to the church on occasions and worshiping and singing. And I enjoyed that. I thought the church was a very quaint little church and a nice little country church, because I was from the big city in Winter Garden. And so
when I first came to the church and joined, I had been looking to see where we should put our letter when we came back home. And it was just so warm, and I guess you could say cozy because it was small. Of course, everybody knew everyone, and there was no pressure there. I did it because I wanted to.
Back years ago, you know, we had the church, we had deacons and elders, like we do now. And the deacons was really handling the finances or something, and the elders were the elders of the church. And I served as a deacon, and then I served as an elder. And then I had the privilege of my daughter and I, Jill, and I were the first father and child to serve on the session together, same time, which was quite an honor.
Well, like I said, I've just always been here. Sunday school, church. Like I said, we used to have Wednesday night services. And the youth group, we had the youth group back then, and it helped. And I also remember getting left at church too. Mama played the piano for years, and I would come to church with her it was on a Wednesday night. And she went off and left me up here. She forgot me. I guess that was the funniest.
And I knew a lot of the older people in the church because there were not friends near where I lived that were anywhere near my age. And so I would walk down to Oakland and visit a lot of the people on the way. And most of them knew me. I don't know how, but they did. I guess one would tell another one that I had gone to see them.
We came here as a very young couple to Oakland, and the main thing I remember is the friendliness of the people in Oakland. And at that time, people visited more. And we made some lifelong friends. I remember mainly the Stanfords and Rosses, the father of Jack Ross, and many other couples that we got to know. And that was what led us, I think, well, I'm sure, to the church.
We used to do a lot of things together. There were a lot of family picnics, not family picnics, but church picnics. We would very often, at least once or twice a summer, go over to Rock Springs. Everybody in the church and have a picnic over there. And we couldn't get by with very much. Somebody was on our track, regardless. At the same time, aunts were Sunday school teachers, uncles were elders. This was before they allowed women to be elders. We didn't get by with very much because everybody was kin to us, and it got home before we did.
Whenever there was a funeral in the church, the children were in that. They always knew they could come and stay with me during the service and let the parents go, except when we had one in our family and we couldn't do it. And then the children said, well, why can't we go up there today? They were just real upset because that was a party time for them. Because we'd come and they'd come play in the tree and spend that time. But that was always really a happy time of the children that you remember, that I remember in particular, and they do too. And Trina and Dave, Jack Ross, on my 90th birthday, they both told me that was one of the first things that they remembered, that I was their first Sunday school teacher.
Yeah, I was the director of the junior choir, and Derek was one of the boys in there, and I also had a cousin's son who was in there, and between the two of them, it was not a fun afternoon when they came, and I used to pray diligently that one or the other of them wouldn't show up because they caused so much trouble. But then on top of that, Derek says I've scarred him for life, because I told him one time not to sing so loud because he was a monotone. And he said he probably could sing really well now, but he just has that complex that I told him he couldn't sing. So that's my legacy from the junior choir.
Oh, that's great.
And they look like such angels. On Sunday morning, you know, they'd get them in their little robes and sitting there in church, and oh, they looked so sweet and angelic, and I knew perfectly good and well what was behind that facade.
The old brick church was like home.
As a very small boy, I can just barely remember the old wooden church that was down on Tubb Street, but the church that I was raised up was in the yellow brick church, and the story was told to me that the elders of the church gathered the members outside the old wooden church one Sunday morning and got enough pledges to build the yellow brick church at that one time. So that was a very special thing.
The old brick church, if my memory is correct today, was built, I think, in 1917. The thing that I always remember about the outside structure, it had a vine growing over the bricks.
Of course, it was a quaint church of the Gothic design and so forth, and it was like they call it the circular church inside, because it was everything. The Sunday schools was all included inside the church, the pulpit and the choir loft and then the congregation. So they all fell right in together. And I remember it had a cellar. Cellars in Florida were not considered a very good thing to have anyways, because it's pretty moist and stuff down there, but cellar, and they had the old furnace down there.
Oh, it was a real quaint little church. And it had ivy growing up it, and then it had a bell tower. And it was, you went in the front door, and then the church was kind of catty-cornered, kind of in a semicircle. And over on this side was where they had the Sunday school rooms.
Well, I remember inside, now this, we didn't have a fellowship hall or anything, but inside you had the sanctuary, and then it was completely open to like a room next door that there were little cubby holes that the different classes met in.
The architectural design from the outside, it had the belfry in it. In fact, that bell that was in that church is in this church, because this church was built in 1971, and the bell was moved from there over to here.
But the church was constructed like many Presbyterian churches in that time in a kind of a semi-round shape, and it couldn't be enlarged. It had a great big heavy slate roof on it, and we tried many different architects to see if we could enlarge it. It was pretty, it had vines covering it, and it was painful to have to tear it down.
Like we said, it was an old family church, and it's like tearing the family home down almost.
We all hated to see that church pulled down, but we've gotten over that. But it was beautiful. Now I have a big picture of that here, and I was married in that church also, so that has meant a lot to me.
Well, it was just a lovely church, you know, the way it was built, and it was unique, the way it was arranged, and of course we all hated to see it torn down, but it was not possible to keep it.
I got to know Oakland when I was in high school. It was a very small town, dirt roads. Up the little building on the left-hand side, there was a hardware store there.
When I was a small boy, this church was still suffering from the effects of the Depression of the 30s. And as you know, the Oakland church, the Oakland area was developed many years ago because it was as far south that you could come by water through the Lake Apopka and the chain of lakes and the Ocklawaha River. So Oakland is really older than Orlando. Railroads came and Orlando grew, and Oakland suffered through the disastrous citrus freezes of 1895 and 6, and the little town just about died. And this was once the headquarters of the Orange Belt Railroad, and the railroad went bankrupt and moved away. So for many years, this little town sat very quietly. And now it is in the center of great growth and activity.
Well, we certainly have more people, and the businesses have crowded in. Orlando used to be a nice little pleasant drive to get into Orlando. Now then, it's hectic, and it was, on occasions, I've made it into Orlando going the old Winter Garden Road in 15 minutes because there was no traffic.
I can remember going to Orlando, you've heard me tell this story, going to Orlando, and where Highway 50 goes, we would cross coming in from Ocoee, and one car came toward us. This was when I was home from college, and my dad said, "Well, who in the world is that?" We knew everybody in the community, most everybody in Orlando. And for somebody, and I can see it right now, it was a maroon-colored car, came toward us, and it upset my dad no end because he did not know who was driving.
Well, of course, a lot of changes have been made. This was originally an agricultural church, almost exclusively citrus, and almost everyone in the church was employed in the citrus business, and that's changed dramatically. This church had a unique pledge card, And the pledge card at one time said that you'll either donate so much money or you could donate so many boxes of citrus fruit. And the fruit could be delivered to the local co-op, and the church would get the benefit of it.
Being in a small place has always been very special to me. Then, of course, you can't conquer progress. Some of the people that lived somewhere else came and found out what a nice place it was to live, and now they have just taken over, so you don't know everyone, but you still have the warm feeling of let me speak to everyone, whether I know them or not, and to share what is so important in this section of God's world.
That's one of the things I like about the construction. And I hate to see the trees go and the groves go, but apparently, and I may be completely out of tune, but I feel that when the freezes came and the groves died, that God had an ultimate plan. And I think He could see that we needed to have a larger area. And so He brought the people to us, and I hope that we can serve them.
This church has always served the community. If you go back and look at the people who have served in leadership roles in the community through various means, this church has provided lots of leadership.
This church was very generous, and the Lord was good to the people in the citrus business, and for many years I think we were gave the most per capita of any church in the General Assembly. The church did a lot of very private, unpublicized charities for local members, and only the treasurer and maybe one or two other members of the church knew the contributions that were made, some of them by the church, some of them through the church.
I like to think that we have been aware of other people's problems, regardless of color.
We do a lot of volunteer work. They have for a number of years, and ever since I've been here, I've known women who volunteered, and I started volunteering at the hospital in 1966, and I've been there ever since. And then we volunteer for the other organizations, the Christian Service Center and the Daily Bread, and the church has been very, very good about volunteering and serving the community in that way.
I feel like that's what we're here for, is to serve and teach others and go out and help.
When I had to go to Florida Hospital for my x-rays, the women of the church, the head of that, she got people listed up. There was 15 different people that would take me every day, and I couldn't have gone if I hadn't have had that, and that has really meant an awful lot to me.
I think the church is the center part of my life. Having been brought up in it, I really didn't know anything else. This church has given me a feeling of being welcome, of being loved, and just because I happened to marry in the family, they still liked me anyhow.
I think that this is a close-knit church, and I think we got a lot of good people, working, hard workers.
We have had difficulties if you were in the citrus business, and the church has been in financial struggles in the past, and we've seen the people pull together, and it has meant a great deal to me and my faith to see the fellow Christians unite and prepare ourselves to serve the community and serve the Lord.
And I remember after my first husband died, the first Sunday that I was back, I came to church, and I guess our pastor was on vacation, and Fred Shepard led the service, and it was on how strong is your faith. And I never had thought about that at all. And I said, I figured out it was much stronger than I thought it was.
You know, without the church and God in your life, it's just an empty shell, really. But the church has been very supportive, but I've heard from so many people who've written and, you know, and asked me, you know, how are you feeling, how are things going, and you know, it makes you feel real nice to know that you have that support.
This church has made a difference in my life by holding me together. When times get rough and you can't keep yourself straight, then there is power in the love and the teachings of the church.
I think that the kids, I think a lot of them are interested in the history of this church, and I think in the future, I think they should carry this on and know, you know, about the history of the church, the people in the church. They will eventually understand all of this. I think as they get older, they will begin to understand it and begin to try to delve into it a little deeper, into the history, and say, well, now what about this? Or now where did this come from? Or what did they do back then? How did they handle this? So I think these things will all come to pass with our younger generation.
I was raised as a very small boy in this church with a lot of family members, and to me this church means family, whether they are actually related to me or not, and that's my ambition and hope for this church, that it'll always be a family church where everyone feels some sense of kin and responsibility for each other.
I would hope that future generations would be aware that this is a loving church and that they would be willing to see to it that that atmosphere continues, that we care about others, that we worship the one true God, and that we are here to help share that message.
I would like to see the church grow and to have more young people come into the church, and even the ones that grow up here, hopefully they will stay. If their career is close by, that they will stay in the church here.
My prayer is that it could keep going as good as it's going and doing and helping, because they do help a lot of people that we don't realize about, a lot of them.
I certainly hope that this church continues to be a leader in the community and feeling responsible for a lot of the activities and the welfare of the community. My great hope is that the church will not get so large that it's not a family, that you don't feel like you're in a church family, that we know each other and we care for each other.
My prayer and hope for the future is this church will continue to be a witness in the community, that we will continue, hopefully, to let the community know that our doors are open and we are friendly, and most of all, we are believers.
I just like to see us get bigger and bigger, that we're already making an impact on this part of the county, and I like to see us get so big as this church when he holds. I like to see it get where the little church, quaint church that we had that was so important to me, I thought it was just the most beautiful thing in the world, and I'd like to see this beautiful sanctuary we got now not big enough to hold us, that we'd be that kind of influence on this whole community.